How's it going, everyone? Kounthawatphinyo here for a hardcore experiment. Today we're going to fully disassemble an Elmoscope II and we're going to paint its guts with black 3.0, which is said to be one of the blackest paints on Earth. And the goal of this experiment is to reduce or eliminate completely the veiling glare present in the Elmoscope II. By doing so, we're also solving the problem for the Kowa 8C, Kowa 16H, and Kowa BNH, which are all the same design and same optics. So if we can make it work for this, we can make it work for everyone. What we have here is a control sample. We have an Elmoscope II and a Kowa 8C. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mod this Elmoscope lens, and afterwards we're gonna compare the results of the flocked or like painted Elmoscope with the not painted Kowa 8C. These lenses are absolutely the same in terms of coatings, glass, construction, everything is identical. So we're gonna be comparing basically siblings. I've never fully disassembled this Elmoscope lens, so that's gonna be quite an experiment, and wish me luck. There's gonna be a lot of time jumps in this video. The first thing I'm gonna do is take out the parts that I know. So I'm gonna be removing the front ring, which is held by 3 tiny screws, tiny screw number 1, tiny screw number 2, tiny screw number 3. And you can use just a regular, very tiny flathead to loosen them. These strip easy, so be careful when you're taking them out. And you don't have to remove them all the way, just loosen them enough that you can get the front ring to spin. This is gonna get very greasy. I have gloves this time, so.
Learning on this channel?
Next level. Okay, so there's grease already in here, and I'm just gonna try and avoid it to get it everywhere. I'm just gonna face up. Now the next thing that I'm going to remove is the skirt with the markings, and this is held by screws on the ring with the finger indents. So there's one here, and one here. And same thing, tiny flathead screws. So far, this is the same process as opening this lens for tune-up. And in the end, we're gonna have to do a tune-up because we're gonna remove the glass. So tune-up will be required. I'm also not removing these ones. I'm just loosening them and keeping them in the body. And then the skirt comes off. There's also oil on this, so taken off. Now I get to the tabs, and this is the focusing ring. We're gonna unscrew that to the back of the lens. Yeah, that's gonna be the next thing. So this part also sits here, and here we have the body of the lens. I think the next step was gonna be to remove all of these screws on the tabs. This is gonna allow the body to slide open and get us on the inside of the lens. That's the plan. So I'm gonna get on gloves because this is gonna get messy. Now I need a slightly larger flathead. So that's what I'm going to get. All resistance is futile. On the way to strip a screw, we learned how to avoid that. Heat gun, here we go. I'm hoping I don't have to do this 6 times, but I'm prepared to.
Moments later.
Trying a different approach. I'm gonna try to open it from the front with a lens wrench, although I have heard from multiple sources that this ring is usually glued, so we already got one glued thing. What is another? Not a lot of confidence. The lens is actually hot. It's actually hot. Got one, motherfucker.
One long, angry line later.
2, 3, 4. Got him. One left. A prayer for the unstuck screws. Yes, got it. Okay. So after a good time, I managed to get all 6 screws out. Just make sure you apply a lot of pressure to them when you're turning. Otherwise, they can strip. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and take out these tabs, which should come out easy, but I need a place to put them. So here we go. I'm going with a tiny flathead, and I'm just pulling out all 3 of them. And 3. With these 3 out of the way, we should be able to just do this. Sweet. Wow. This glass is really thick. Like, can you see the edge of it? There's a lot of grease. I think this is a good time to clean this. It's not like I'm not getting any grease on the glass at this point. Is this a good method? I don't know. This seems okay for now. Okay, so now moving to the other part. And we're pretty good on grease. So there's two things I want to do here. In an ideal world, I want to get all of the glass out and figure out what I need to paint on the inside of this. Then I want to paint the edges of both glasses and then rebuild everything. We're going to see how far we're going to get into that. This is so scary because this part can crack the glass. For science, right? For science. So that kind of sucks, but at the same time, it didn't harm the glass. I think this ring is glued. I guess we're gonna have to accept that we can't get the glass out. Like I can do all of this tube, but it would be safer to do it without the glass in here. But you see the sheen? Like that's the kind of stuff you wanna get rid of.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Do I love it? No. Do I have an option? I mean, no one's forcing me to make this video. Yeah, but at the same time, I don't want to press in really hard because it's the glass. So if I press down, I'm effectively applying pressure for it to crack.
Well, I mean, how much does this lens cost anyway, you know?
We didn't manage to get to the glass, so we're gonna paint around it. The first thing I'm gonna do is get some masking tape and I'm gonna do a contact test on the glass to see if it does anything to the coatings. As you can see, it barely gets any adherence. So I'm just gonna cover the entire glass in the front and the back with masking tape, and then we're gonna paint everything. What I'm trying to do here is use the straight edge of the tape to get as close to the bevel on the glass as I can. The gloves really don't go well with the tape, so I'm just accepting that I'm gonna have to clean this later. And if you look here, you'll see that there's a little bevel on the edge. That's as far as I want to take the tape because I also want to paint that edge black. That happens on the front as well. Why did I decide to make this video? Why did I think this was a good idea?
You thought this would be easier?
No, it's because you said this is going to be a great video. I'm so curious to see how it turns out. Well, this is how it's turning out. This is perfect. Perfect glass. Look at that. Bam. I kind of got the edge that I wanted. Now we're going to do the inside. I think it's clear what I'm doing, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And then we cut to, the more I do it, the more it looks like a pineapple.
Eventually.
I finished doing this kind of stuff on everything. I put tape on all surfaces, and the only thing I didn't cover were the absolute edges because I want to paint them and get rid of veiling layer there since I didn't get the glass out. And now we're gonna get the paint and get started. So I'm gonna figure out how to use this paint. There's an instruction thing here. Is it totally non-absorbent, metal or plastic? I guess, yeah. Give it a nice thin undercoat of black 2.0, which we don't have. We're gonna just add a layer. It says thin coat, 2 hours, thin coat, overnight, thin coat if needed. Hair dry for max blackness. I just bought these. They're like the cheapest option that gave me multiple sizes. And the surfaces we wanna cover is all of this black part on the bottom here, and then I want to cover the outside since I cannot get the glass out. I want to cover all of that ring, and then on the front I want to cover all of the front again, and here pretty much everything on this. So let's start with this one then. Do I have to shake this? Wow, I don't know if I'm excited about this. I'm definitely terrified. It is getting much less reflective, that's for sure.
Many, many minutes later.
The painting of this thing is too long, so I just finished the first coating. This has to sit for 2 hours, and then I'm gonna do another coating, which is gonna sit overnight. And then tomorrow morning, I can probably do a third thin coating and dry it with a hair dryer.
The next day.
And I'm looking at it. It's not as black as I thought it would be. I'm gonna peel off this tape and reassemble the lens. And then we're gonna go into tuning and rebuilding everything, re-greasing. So let's get started. There is some paint that went under the tape, so we are going to have to deal with that. And there's a fair amount of tape residue and paint, especially towards the edges. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of the paint on the main glass, but not get rid of the paint on the edges that we painted. I guess when you're doing this, if you're ever doing this, is make sure all of your pineapple slices overlap. So when you start pulling one of them, they all come together, unlike what I did. It's my main takeaway. The one thing that I had to do while I was painting was continuously clear out the screw holes on this piece because the paint gets super thick and it was going to block the threads. Okay, so this glass is here, but the glass looks pretty filthy with the tape. This is just deep enough to hurt my hand, so I'm loving it. Here we go, we cleared everything. There's paint all over, you can see. I tried to do my best, apparently it was not good enough, so I'm gonna do that thing that's very scary and try to clean it a little now, just so I can either be thinking that I destroyed the lens or realize that I didn't.
Much later.
I cleaned the glass pretty decently. There's a little bit of grease on the outer surfaces, but those I can always clean later. And I'm also running out of Kim wipes, so that's something to be dealt with. So what we're gonna do now is first I'm gonna clear things up a bit here, and then I'm going to re-grease and rebuild the lens so we can move on to the next step, which is fine-tuning. Now I got this grease here, which everybody loves. Look at this beautiful can of grease. This is Mobile 28. This is what we're gonna be using. So I'm getting a little stick here. So I'm gonna go with a light layer of grease around this and a light layer of grease around this and try to rebuild it and see how it goes. Get a little piece of this guy. And here we go. Is this too much? We'll know soon enough. You can already see the shine. Maybe this would be enough for the whole thing. Maybe this would be too much for the whole thing. So I'm gonna put this here and I'm gonna set this aside because I don't wanna get into too much before it's too soon. Now when I try to slide this in, I'm getting a little more dampness and the grease is going. Okay, this feels much more natural. I'm gonna turn it around a few times just to get the grease more evenly spread. And then I'm gonna remove the excess. There's a lot of extra, especially on the edges of everything. So I'm gonna carefully, as best as we can, careful is a overrated word these days. Get this out. And then I'm gonna do the same for this guy. This edge has a ton of it. It's gonna fold it into a corner. So I got grease on the inside. I'm gonna do this, reassemble this. So I'm gonna rotate the screws so I have screws here, 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 but none here. And it doesn't really matter right now how well aligned those things are, because we're gonna get to that later. I have our screws here and our tabs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't lose anything, that's great. Drop in the tab. So the reason I wanted to clean the inside of the lens was because I don't want to put grease and then have to go back in. So the outside can be a little messy still at this point, but we really don't want the inside to have paint or tape residue or any of that stuff. Later we're going to be using these tabs to align the front and the rear elements. So this is the second tab. The second tab has no markings. This is the tab that you would shorten if you want to adjust minimum focus, following one of my oldest tutorials involving Kowa lenses. I'm also going to teach you a way to realign this without using super glue, because that was a stupid thing to do. But I'm basically reversing the entire process from yesterday. Just adding the screws back into the holes. Nothing is being super tightened yet. Now there's a few more things that we want to do. The first of them is make sure that this moves. It does. Great. Good start. The lens is looking kind of all right through here. I'm going to use the spare grease that I have and just apply it out here on these threads. And I don't want to put a ton of it because I don't want this to be leaking everywhere when the lens warms up. And it doesn't have to be perfect because once we add the rest of the body, the helicoid itself is gonna spread the grease. I'm gonna stop the process. We're gonna do a setup to test for alignment and adjust that. So I'm gonna stop recording now and I'm gonna pick this up later.
Moments later.
I've reassembled the lens and I built the setup here that we're gonna use to tune up the focus and adjust for any rotation we have in the anamorphic elements of the Kowa or Elmo II. Behind it, I have a 135mm f2, so you always want to go with a longer lens and a fast aperture to get the critical focus, and then everything else will perform better than this. And in the back, I have the GH5, and I'm also rolling on this camera so I can refer to the images that I'm seeing here. First thing of all, I'm gonna make sure that I'm focused to infinity, and infinity is a tree that's like, it's over there. I'll first have to take out the Kowa. Here we go. So I'm gonna take this out, and I'm gonna look at that tree, find perfect focus, definitely not that way, here we go. This kind of sets the bar for where we're headed. I'm just not gonna touch the taking lens. It's set, it's great. I'm gonna add the Elmo II in the front, and then we're gonna fiddle with those tabs and the screws. I've made a previous version of this process a million years back. The image is very blurry right now as I adjust the distance of the front and rear elements by this sliding tube. We can see focus get better, but it never gets fully sharp. Ultimately, take the front screws out of all the tabs and then just adjust the rotation of it until you get a very sharp picture. This is also set by how far forward this element is. The further these elements are from each other, the closer we are to infinity focus. Here we go, this is perfect. If I could lock this here, that'd be it. I want to push this longer tab, the central one, as far forward as I can and try to lock it down without ruining the picture. As I push down on it, you'll see the image goes more and more out of focus. So we're gonna try to tweak and find it back. I'm gonna add a second screw here because the first one did not lock it yet.
You get the idea.
This is 135mm at f2 on a micro four thirds sensor. So it's really, really, really critical focus that we're looking at. And it's good enough for now. So now I'm gonna put the rest of the housing around this lens now that we tweaked it, and we can finally compare the levels of veiling glare. When reassembling the lens, we wanna have the threads facing forward because the front is gonna screw onto it. And then you're gonna rotate it on the opposite direction of the helicoid just until you get a click and you're gonna know you can go in. Here we go. And then when it goes in, you just keep it rolling all the way through. Once we screw the front of the lens, which is what I'm gonna do now, and we rotate this body, this is gonna push the focus back. Boom. Add the skirt. Okay. And I'm gonna use a tiny, tiny, tiny flathead to get this back in. We're gonna put this back on the camera and then tweak the marks. So the skirt will still need to roll around a bit. There's 3 of them here. And then we have the ones on the front. No need to over tighten these screws. To get it aligned to that scenario where we just saw, I had to get Blake's help, and we were both like, I was holding the lens in place and he was tightening the screws because it just wouldn't go by itself. It was very dissatisfied with us. So it might take a while to get focus exactly as you want it. Now I'm gonna mount it back on here and we're going to tune the focus marks to what it should be. I'm just pushing it in to make sure that the lens is flat towards the sensor. So now I wanna loosen these 3 screws around the focus ring so we can adjust the skirt. And I have one loosen. 3, okay, I can feel it moving already. And I'm going to line up the infinity mark with the mark for focus on the lens to say that this is infinity, although we can go a bit past. So yeah, this is pretty good. So I'm gonna line up this infinity here, hold it in place, and tighten these guys. 2 and 3. Now that we finally finished building the lens, we're gonna set up a test with this one, which is the modified painted black, and the original one to see if the veiling glare was indeed affected. Fun!
Soon after.
So we got Blake over there. I have a 50mm at f2. We're focused there, and this is the flare that we're getting. So it's still vaguely, try to hit it from an angle up. Yeah, bring it lower, 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 okay. And we're gonna see how it behaves in terms of flares. Okay, so I gotta, first of all, do this. Oh, the flares are slightly different. It worked! It worked. It really worked. This was not all for nothing, this was worth it. So painting this thing actually yielded us better results than the non-painted version. We get no veiling glare, especially for centered frame lights, and we lose the white vignette. I don't know exactly if it is the inside paint or if it's just painting the edge of the glass. Honestly, I want to believe it's the inside paint because this was a lot of work. This is probably the longest mod I've done on a lens and the one that stressed me the most. So it paid off. Yay, good stuff. Now you know how to disassemble this, reassemble it, paint it, also realign and make sure that your focus marks are set. This concludes this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe, to like this video. Tell me if you're doing this. I am dying to know. I'm Kounthawatphinyo, and I'll see you soon.
Nice.
Wow, here,
Very cool.
come look.